Seth Rollins is all over the news for his comments about CM Punk. So we're going to talk about that in a new video on 3 Count Commentaries. I am your host, MagMongoSlade. So apparently there was a podcast with Jimmy Traina, which Seth Rollins discussed his issues with CM Punk. And I decided to just do a timeline of the ups and downs, even though it's mostly been downs the last couple of years. So before we get into Seth Rollins and his issues with CM Punk and what he said about CM Punk and Sports Illustrated, let's give a timeline for these events. So in my research, we go way back in time to when a young Seth Rollins was trying to get into the wrestling business. He moves from Iowa to Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, there was a Ring of Honor training school being run by CM Punk. So he actually spent a little bit of time there before it was revealed that he could not afford the training. Then he had to leave. So then he lived in his car for a little bit before ended up being trained in Chicago by another man, I believe by the name of Danny Daniels or somebody like that. And that guy who was the guy who broke him into the business. So, of course, Seth Rollins becomes Tyler Black in Ring of Honor. He follows in the footsteps of CM Punk. If you actually go and read some of the old message boards from like the Ring of Honor days, you will see a lot of people calling him a poor man CM Punk. He's a CM Punk ripoff, all this kind of stuff. He can never replace CM Punk. And so this is where you got to get the idea that, you know, he's consistently being compared to CM Punk. But Seth Rollins, then Tyler Black, was always complimentary of CM Punk, always saying that CM Punk did him favors, CM Punk looked out for him, you know, and all these sorts of things. So then, of course, we get to the Shield. CM Punk and his Colt Cabana diatribe talks about WWE coming to him with the idea for the Shield, and he picked, of course, Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, and Cassius Ohno. The WWE was like, Chris Hero, Cassius Ohno, no. We're going to replace him with Liaki, otherwise known as Roman Reigns. So, in other words, Seth Rollins' existence on the main roster, the big push, was because CM Punk saw something in him and chose him specifically. One of the 2 people he chose in the Shield. So, you saw this situation, and Seth Rollins he's not quite a CM Punk protege, but he's clearly being a guy who was being groomed. He worked in the same place with CM Punk all these years. Kerry Silkin saw him a lot like a CM Punk. The fans started seeing that too. And then CM Punk himself chose him to be in a stable with him in WWE. Things are looking up. Things are looking rosy. There's tons of tweets of Seth Rollins putting over CM Punk, basically talking about how great he is and how great his matches are. Even in one tweet, he says that he was never been prouder to be called a poor man CM Punk. So this was in 2011. So this was before everything hit the fan and CM Punk got bitter and upset. So then, of course, 2014, 2015 happens and CM Punk is not on the good side of WWE anymore. Now, despite this, Seth Rollins was still giving CM Punk a lot of credit. In 2018, after a show in Chicago where he was trained, Seth Rollins did a live promo for the Chicago audience, putting over the town, the crowd, or whatever. And then on Twitter, he went afterwards and said this: "I remember so much so fondly of this city. I would be remiss if I didn't mention CM Punk and Colt Cabana, 2 guys who changed the game for Chicago wrestling. They made Chicago feel special, made me feel like this place could lead the rest of the world. I'm eternally grateful for the inspiration and motivation Punk and Cabana provided me at a very formative age, helped shape my work ethic and wrestling for years to come." So, even in 2018, he's still giving CM Punk credit with his work. So in 2019, something starts to get a little weird. Seth Rollins is now trying to angle for a match with CM Punk. CM Punk has shown up at WWE backstage, and he's tweeting like, "Fight me, CM Punk," and all this kind of stuff. And Punk kind of plays it off, tells him to stop tweeting. and he's not on that level and all this sorts of stuff. So over time, however, CM Punk gets more and more bitter. He's angry about various things that have occurred. Specifically in 2022, there was a problem with obviously the Sasha Banks and Naomi situation, in which CM Punk says that, well, I think this was after Vince had retired, and Punk was asked about his thoughts about this. And then he says that the company is full of bootlickers and all this kind of stuff, right? So Punk is really just attacking the company. And of course, he's on AEW TV talking about the 2-for-1 at WrestleMania and all this kind of stuff. And so Seth Rollins started to basically turn on him. This is where you started seeing Seth Rollins make comments, like when he made the comment about CM Punk being a cancer. That, you know, we saw it over there, we see it over here. You know, he's not a good guy, stay away from me. But despite that, early in 2023, before CM Punk returns, this is February 2023, Seth Rollins did an interview where he says it pains him to say terrible things about CM Punk. He says, I don't need to repeat what I said about Chicago Phil in an interview last week. But if you need to, I'm sure you can Google it. Look, the bottom line is it's the same with Logan Paul. Punk and Logan Paul are two different personalities, but they're as selfish as it comes. If you're not going to help, then I don't want you a part of our industry. I don't want you a part of our company, and that's all there is to that. Here's the thing. I'll say one thing about Punk. I'll end it on a positive note with him. That guy has given my career so much that it pains me to have to say bad things about him. He helped me out. He really did. He's been a good guy to me for a lot of my career. But for whatever reason, for the past maybe 6 or 7 years, he's in a different headspace, and we're not on the same page. To see kind of what he's done, taken, it's always been about him. I'm not a fan. I'm just not a fan. There's a place for him, man. He's got a lot to give. I just wish his head was in the right spot. So that was one of the final real comments that was made. CM Punk, of course, will be fired from AEW in August of 2023. So now he shows up in December or November, late November 2023. CM Punk returns to WWE at Survivor Series. There's a video of Seth Rollins cursing and saying "fuck you" to CM Punk, giving him the finger, and he's being held back by referees and Michael Cole and a couple of other people. And so everybody wants to know what Seth Rollins thinks, and they want to get to why he feels so strongly in his dislike for CM Punk. But first, they started with when did he know that CM Punk was going to be there? And he says, when I heard his music at Survivor Series, when I heard his music. And he says, upon reflection, it's easy to understand why something like that would be kept as close to the vest as possible. I understand why very few people knew what was going on that day, but in that moment, I was extremely emotional. In the moment, after everything we've been through and everything that company has been through with that particular person as well, and then the night itself, Randy's return, all of it, it was a very emotional moment for me. Obviously, if you have any amount of social media, you saw how I reacted in that moment. It was very raw, real response from me. Did I go too far? Maybe. It was what it was. I can't take it back. And he says, it was an extremely emotional moment for me. Everyone knows how I feel about CM Punk. I've not made it any more transparent over the past few years. Nothing has changed in that regard. In that moment, I was extremely emotional, and you got a lot of the real, raw emotion out of me. I don't usually get that worked up about much, but you caught me off guard, and there was a lot of real emotion there. That's probably as much as I can say on that without going too far. I regret that part of it. And what he means is a lot of the cursing and stuff. He says, I regret that part of it because I take my responsibility to our younger audience seriously. That part of it, it did go too far. I wish I would have handled myself with a little bit more composure. I can't take it back. I can't apologize to our younger fans and the fan families if I offended anybody. It was what it was, a moment in time. And then he says, I've been in WWE for 10 years now, so kind of nothing surprises me anymore, fully. I heard rumblings, obviously something they want to keep pretty close to the vest for obvious reasons. Surprises are great in our industry, And in this age of social media where everything is spoiled, it's nice to have surprises. That wasn't a very nice surprise for me, but it was for a lot of people out there who are fans of the guy for whatever reason. It was mostly just like, ah, man, this is it. This is what we have to deal with now. This is our future moving forward, how we navigate this. It was kind of an emotional reaction to that, compounded with the adrenaline of what we experienced inside the Double Cage at War Games. He says, my wife was there and I had a few people kind of corral me, I suppose. My wife is pretty good at understanding my temperament and making sure I'm level when I need to be. Kudos to her. She made sure I didn't get into any more trouble. There were enough people there who knew that I would be upset in the moment and to take care of me and didn't get too chaotic. Then, of course, he was asked if he's seen CM Punk afterwards, and he says no, he didn't see him. So now he's going to get into what his problem with CM Punk is. And this is going to be very interesting, even though he kind of hinted at it a little bit in previous comments. He says, a lot of it is personal. A lot of it is stuff I just really don't want to get into. For the most part, I just think that he's been really selfish when it comes to his perspective on this industry. I think he's been extremely self-serving. He's played the martyr role to a T and has for someone who, when I met the guy, and look, I have a lot of good things to say about him, about my parts of the relationship with him. He helped me in places when he didn't have to, whether that was for his own good or not. I'm not really sure. Regardless, it helped me get where I needed to go and do the things I needed to do. For a guy who, when I met him, made it seem like he was all about giving back to the business, he really turned into a pretty selfish guy, wanted to take more from the industry. Look, he said some really bad things about me, talked down about me for years, and the company for years. I'm talking about some really bad stuff. Called me a bootlicker and crap like that. You don't know me. You don't know what I stand for. I'm a loyal person, and I felt pretty insulted by a lot of the ways he treated me. Treated the place I worked for, treated friends that I worked with. I don't need to get into the stuff with Colt Cabana. If you want to look into that kind of stuff, that's out there. Just the way he treated people. The way I felt like he's looking out for himself. And then the way he talked about me and my friends and the people who are here putting the hard work in at WWE. Trying to make this thing as good as we possibly can because we love this industry, truly love it, not just what it can do for us. We actually love it and want to give back to it, make it the best it could possibly be. I also felt like he's a fraud in that sense, or at least turned into one at some point in the last decade. That's the long of it. It's a deep-rooted, I wouldn't call it hatred, but there's animosity there. So we're going to read this last little piece and then we're going to do a little bit of analysis on it. So the last little bit is if he is willing to work with CM Punk. And if he is in a position to be able to reject doing a match with CM Punk. And then he said, it's a negotiation. It's a conversation. No one is forcing something on you, but I'm a businessman. I'm hoping to do business if it's there to be done. I'm open to mending fences if that's even possible. I know this might sound crazy, but I'm open to it. I'm almost 38, and I ain't got time to hold all these grudges. I think it's a lot of energy to hold that negativity in, and I like to put that energy somewhere else and make it positive. I'm open to all different facets of what this could be. There are certain conversations that go on. It's not cut and dry. You have to do this. Sometimes it is. I've been in positions where it's like, this is your job. I pay you the check. This is what I want you to do. And that's just how it is. That's okay too. If you don't like it, you can skip it and we don't have to do business. I'm pretty open-minded when it comes to stuff like that. I think there will be a way to make it work for everybody. He says he's the best in the world. That ain't the case. I'm the best in the world. I'll make anything work no matter what it is. So, he has been remarkably consistent outside of his seemingly out of character yelling at CM Punk during Survivor Series, where he was yelling at him in the crowd, which made me think it was a work because that definitely was out of character. Seth Rollins has been both critical and complimentary of CM Punk, while CM Punk has been mostly either derisive or what's the other word I'm looking for? Dismissive. Either he has completely dismissed the idea of wrestling with Seth Rollins or wanting anything to do with him or thinking much of him at all, or he's been pretty derisive of him, calling him, he wasn't the only one that got called a bootlicker, by the way. And plus, I think Seth is mostly offended on the behalf of other wrestlers, like, The Miz, who CM Punk has said stuff about Roman Reigns, who has, CM Punk has said stuff about various other wrestlers that CM Punk has offended on purpose by saying really crazy stuff to them. And, of course, we know that Seth Rollins comes from Ring of Honor, and there's a relationship that you have there with guys like Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn and the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega. Like, all of this is kind of a cross-pollination of the independent wrestling scene, where these guys know each other. They might not have close relationships, but they knew each other from the independents. They watched each other. So many of these guys have had bumped heads with CM Punk. Now, in another part of the interview, Seth Rollins has always said that his situation with CM Punk isn't as serious as the one that happened over in AEW, and it'll never go as far as that. And they're professionals in WWE, which is probably the most shoot comment in this whole ordeal. And I really have been trying to appreciate the relationship here, because it all seems to be working together pretty damn well when you look at it from a storyline perspective and from a relationship perspective. CM Punk was instrumental in really helping this guy, and somehow this thing seemed to really turn, and Seth Rollins hasn't all of a sudden just started hating CM Punk. He's still been complimentary, even though he has now said that he doesn't like him and he would prefer to not have to deal with him. But, he did some really good stuff for me in the past, and if we have a chance to do business, he's willing to do that business. But so we're in a interesting scenario here where they have a lot to work with in terms of a storyline for an upcoming match. But he seems to have a problem with the judgmental nature of CM Punk, which a lot of people do, and it's not that much of a surprise that, with all the virtue signaling that CM Punk did, that people start to view him as a fraud and a hypocrite and a guy who, is only really about himself. Because, again, when it comes to virtue signaling, it is more about yourself than whatever the issue is. And CM Punk has said a lot of things in interviews that you can look at it and be like, I'm not sure if you meant that. For instance, his comment about WWE structure not changing, and why are they bullying Sasha Banks and Naomi? Like, what's changed? They talked about them quitting, and they talked about them on television, and they did the same thing to him, and they did the same thing to Steve Austin. Like, the company hasn't changed, that they do this kind of stuff. It's petty, it's yada yada yada, and the bootleggers are just gonna let's let it happen. But when Big Swole was attacked by Tony Khan on Twitter, and was pretty much the only AEW wrestler that has ever been released that I think Tony Khan has ever addressed personally, and basically said she wasn't good enough to be there, CM Punk didn't say anything. And so when you look at somebody who says, well, you're supposed to stand up for each other, and you're supposed to look out for one another, and he doesn't do that. When Big Swole is attacked by Tony Khan on Twitter, he didn't stand up for her. Who stood up for her was Lio Rush. And he got canned from AEW for standing up for Big Swole. And CM Punk still didn't do anything. So yeah, we're looking at a situation where this guy is 100% hypocrite. He's full of shit. But then again, when you're virtue signaling, that is what it's about. It's about you. It's not about the cause. It's about yourself. And that's, pretty typical of people with a certain mindset. It's almost narcissistic. Hey, look at me. I'm a good person. I know all the good buzzwords to say. I say, whatever I want. Like, hey, everybody needs to have a union. He didn't start any unions. He didn't start a union in UFC, and he claims all the UFC fighters should start a union. He didn't try to start a union in AEW. Even when the EVPs were picking fights, he didn't start a union, which probably would have been the best reason to start a goddamn union, is you have a legitimately adversarial relationship with the office. He didn't start a union then. He instead tried to, punch some of those guys out, rightly or wrongly. Seth Rollins, he's in a unique situation. He wouldn't be where he is at all without CM Punk. And if you watch Seth Rollins' career, he's been following in CM Punk's footsteps. He became a top star in Ring of Honor after CM Punk left. He became a top guy in WWE after CM Punk left. He gave CM Punk all this credit for helping him when he first got started. CM Punk picked him specifically to be in the Shield. A lot of his success is because of CM Punk. But he's also had to deal with being verbally attacked by CM Punk, his friends being attacked by CM Punk, being judged by CM Punk, and he doesn't like it. And I think he's got to straddle the fence between being grown-ass man, I don't have to listen to this shit and deal with this anymore, and being an appreciative sort of fanboy who's like, man, you did a lot for me, I really appreciate it, but that doesn't mean I have to take abuse from you. And that's an interesting scenario in this, I guess, realistic, I don't want to call it completely shoot situation, because I'm sure some of it is at work. But it's also a matter of perspective. Some people thought CM Punk was right to say all the stuff that he said about, the WWE and the wrestlers in the company. And Rollins has been a company guy. He is riding too hard for WWE. When he gets into arguments with people like Will Ospreay, or he's arguing with fans about whether WWE has the best roster in the world, or the best shows in the world, or the best, whatever. Maybe Rollins is going too far. Maybe he needs to pull it back. It's all a matter of perspective, but they have a rocky relationship. And I think it is the best story that you could tell with CM Punk right now, because this is the guy who probably has been the most offended by the CM Punk verbal tongue lashings that he's been given to WWE, because he was the guy who CM Punk put on that pedestal. He's the guy who has been trying to balance how to best both give and receive criticism that is not said in the most tasteful way. A lot of the CM Punk stuff is pretty graphic. Like when you say you guys are supposed to lick the boot, not eat the whole thing, and all of this kind of stuff, telling the Miz to go suck a blood-covered dick, and all this kind of weird stuff. Yeah, and you have to still be professional in addressing that, and people are constantly asking you about it. And I get it. I understand his frustration. And now people are chanting CM Punk at him. Look, they have a lot of ammunition if they want to do a match. There's a lot there. If they want to do a series of matches, there's a lot there. So there's a lot of things that they can discuss. Hopefully they can work it out. I'm pretty sure they will, because it seems like CM Punk is shooting an angle. He's actually working with Rollins now. He's retaliating to things that Rollins is saying. He's letting people chant for Rollins and stuff like that. So that seems to be the direction that we're going in. So maybe they've already hashed it out. And, CM Punk is going to be like, hey, they're making these things public and whatever. Like the mentioning of Colt Cabana was an interesting thing. But considering, again, when Seth Rollins did his post-match promo in Chicago, he mentioned Colt Cabana being a guy who also helped him. So you also have to deal with that too. There's a lot to work with in this storyline. And considering the WWE is more professional, they're going to be able to get a lot out of this. This is 10 years of stuff. They could probably run this for like 2 or 3 years if they wanted to. If they paced it right, you could really spread this story out for a really long time. All right, let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you guys later.